Military personnel of Reddit. What's the weirdest, funniest punishment you've seen handed down by a superior? Story 1 USMC here in our unit, we had one guy that would constantly hum songs. Well, one day our CEO had enough of his behavior, so he tells him to report to his locker. So he goes to his locker and stands in front of it. CEO tells him to get inside the locker. When he does, he shuts and locks the door with him inside. He reaches in his pocket and pulls out a quarter and pushes it through the vent holes and tells the guy to start singing, and tells him that whenever someone puts a quarter in the slot, he was to sing another song. This went on for 6 hours. The guy made around $15 in quarters, and we were all in pain from laughing at him. Needless to say, he acquired the name Jukebox and never hummed again. Edit whoa. Thanks for the gold. Story 2, what are they going to do? Bin my dog tags. Take my birthday away. Chuckle. Yep, apparently a Navy captain did just that once on purpose by deliberately sailing parallel to the international date line, then slipping across it right on midnight. Tomorrow suddenly became yesterday, and no birthday for you this year, you chucklehead. Story 3, in U.S. Army basic training, one soldier lost his canteen and asked the drill sergeant if he had seen it. The drill was angry at this for some reason and made the private wander around for a few hours, asking all kinds of inanimate objects if they had seen his canteen. So things like, truck, have you seen my canteen? Story 4, got caught on basic with my iPod, and I ran around the camp for near 2 hours with my iPod over my head shouting, I'm a stupid FK, for bringing my iPod in the field as the enemy was attacking our camp. I then proceeded to put my iPod in a plastic bag, then taped it onto my helmet, and from there on, I responded to private iPod. When my instructor shouted play, I had to sing, skip, I had to switch song, etc. It lasted 2 weeks, even during the night when I had 1 to 2 hours to sleep. Story 5, think I can get this one. Don't know if you guys know what outdoor barracks are, but it's where your front door leads to outside like a motel. Consider a dorm where all the doors lead to outside. If you're on the 3rd or 4th floor, etc., your door would lead to a catwalk balcony, right outside. Anyway, it's me and my boy Y. Here, let's call him Will. Will is 21 and has authorized 72-ounce worth of beer in his fridge 6-pack. Room inspection time, mother. Better be clean, me, and we'll get some awesome first-degree love from our guardian, and we get Gunny to do our inspection. Will's got a sock on the floor, a sock. Look, I don't know if you guys know about military cleanliness and inspections, but when you're getting inspected by a gunny, a sock on the ground is the equivalent of a pregnant dead hooker. Gunny goes Super Saiyan, and now starts the beginning of the end. Gunny has turned into a hungry, hateful hound, and is now going to start smelling every little nook and cranny to smash Will. And since Will is my roomie, I'm going to feel the wrath too. Also, when you're getting inspected, anything you lock up, wall lockers, desks, drawers, usually won't get asked to be opened, but if it's not locked, it's free game. Well, didn't lock his wall locker up. Gunny's eyes open up to the size of my afghan by the core. It's the other sock. God damn it. Well, along with this sock is a cup filled with pennies. Yes, pennies, like $19 worth of pennies, so you do the math. Gunny instantly pulls the penny pot and projects it all over the room. There's pennies everywhere. They're on the floor, in my bed, in the shower, the sink, some still in the cup, in Gunny's hat. Everywhere, Gunny starts sniffing more and opens the fridge. Remember how you're allowed 72 Ozies of beer? Well, Gunny finds some. Holy Mother of God, Marine, you better hope my math sucks, which it does. So give me a minute, but if this is over your limit, Will has 3 12-ounces cans and a 40. The 40 was half empty, by the way, but by default that adds up to, drum roll please, 76 ounces. He overdid it by 4 ounces. At this point, Gunny is calm, and he looks at us. Hey, Race, another thing you probably don't know. Gunnies are not mythical creatures you hear about. They are real. There's a lot of documentation on them. Recently, there was a documentary put out about them. What I'm getting at is that when a gunny is chewing you out and then becomes calm, it's because he's seen it. He's seen the fate of the 2 lances. It's perfect. Oh, break them down, repent for their sins, and make them thoughtless. Order following Marines. We saw a twinkle in his eye, a tear, and a joyous smile as he whispered to himself, it's perfect, you guys. I like this room. I like it a lot. I also like that basketball court over there. There was a basketball court about 50 ids in the courtyard. I want those 2 together. You see that basketball court, devils. Yes, Gunny, I want your room there. You may think this is some backwards, which it is, but in the Marine Corps, backwards and is actually the preferred method of progress. We knew exactly what he wanted. A good old Chinese field day, which is when you take all the contents of the room out of the room until it's completely gutted and clean it, then return the contents. Only Gunny put his mythical spin on it and made us literally set the room up identically on the court. So we get started, and this isn't easy. First off, I forgot my keys at the shop. Gunny ain't letting us go back, so I can't get my keys to unlock my coffin bed with drawers attached underneath my wall locker, or anything make easy to move. Gunny stated the guidelines that he doesn't care how we get the room there. Our technique started off kitty cornering things, but that sucked after about 2 hours. So it got to the point where we just started a straight up roll, desks, drawers, beds, Everything in the barracks is usually made to last, either out of thick or some sort of aluminum alloy. Ours was the metal orchestra of 1,000 toddlers banging on pans. People are looking at us, laughing at us, sitting down to watch us. This is the talk of the whole base. A group of dudes were about ready to play basketball. Not today, mother. Unless you want to sleep on the court, you're out of luck. We'll get the fabulous idea. Gunny steps out, and it's SGT watching us. SGT. Gunny said we could use any method to get the stuff on the court. Okay, we'd like to run to the PX and get a skateboard. It's about 5 miles away. Okay. Good luck. You got 20 minutes. We're sweaty as might I add you. And our uniforms are, you have to look good everywhere you go, including the PX, looking sloppy and half dead as we run to PX, find a skateboard, and run back. I know I was brief riding the skateboard pickup, but believe me, there was something in its own in the 100 July North Carolina heat. We get back, giant wall locker number 1. Its wheels should be a little lighter since the 19,000 pennies have been carefully removed from its empty space. All right, John, this skateboard is going to make this hella easy. Let's pick up the wall locker and kitty it onto the board. Okay, well, we start slowly, kittying it on the boa. Snap, snap, snap cracker, and mother pop. That broke right away. Right the away like pedestrian status in a crosswalk. Anyway, that's about it. We continued to move until about 7 p.m. when it started to rain, and Gunny finally returned like, oh, I forgot about these. And it started to rain. I think I could get in trouble. Not entirely sure, but I could. He let in the routine right when we were about to get fun with it. We just had gotten the lamps, and we're going to use people to holding our posters to simulate walls. After that, a few of our buddies helped us back in. What a day in North Cackalack. Guy in basic dropped the biggest turd you've ever seen in the commode. So he shows the drill sergeants who then make him suit up in full combat gear, weapon and all, and guard it all night. The whole halt, who goes there, pretty amusing. Story 6, my brother told me that when he was in basic, a drill sergeant yelled at this guy to beat his face, meaning to do push-ups, said guy had no clue it meant that, and promptly punched himself in the face, really hard, and fell to the ground. The drill sergeant had to walk that one off, and my brother said you could hear him laughing hysterically as he walked behind a building. Not totally relevant, but I figured I'd share. Edit, thank you all for the sweet, tender, juicy karma. You honor me greatly. I can almost definitely guarantee I'm going to screw it up. Thank you all the same. Story 7, Marine Boot Camp. We had a guy that somehow got his watch through the indoc. They take all year when you first get there. Well, the DIs found out he had it when they saw him wearing it one day. So they put him in the squad bay trash can and put the lid on it. Every time they walked by and kicked it head pop out with his watch and yell, I saw the time on deck, ISR 945, and then go back into his can like the freaking Grouch from Sesame Street. It was really hard not to laugh at that. Edit, thank for the gold kind stranger. Story 8, I was in a gender mixed company in basic. The third floor of the barracks was split with females on one half and males on the other. Males were not allowed in the female half and vice versa. My platoon was out back practicing throwing grenade bodies, and a window on the female side of the third floor opened, and a male sneaked out of the window onto the ledge. It was immediately obvious to everyone, including our drill SGT, that he had been in there messing around with a female, and a drill SGT must have come down the hall, forcing him to get out onto the ledge so he wouldn't get caught. Our drill SGT looked at the guy for a minute and then yelled really sarcastically, "Don't do it private. You have lots to live for." Then they put him on suicide watch and made him hand over his belts and tie and shoelaces and everything that he could hang himself with, and made him drag his newly bare mattress out into the hallway next to the fire guard desk and sleep out there every night until we graduated 4 weeks later. And they made his battle buddy sleep on the floor next to him for the first week. TLDR, male caught messing around with female, treated like potential suicide for remaining month of BCT. Edit, thanks for the gold. I forgot to mention that we all called the guy airborne for the rest of basic. Story 9, a fellow lance corporal at the time let out a sneeze. Huge snot rocket pops out and lands on his cheek. I mean, just one beast of a thing. My sergeant standing in front of him talking to him while this happened let out a "what the you nasty," put it back, and right back up it went. Funniest I've seen. Edit gold. You, sir, or madam, must be confused. Now notice that spider on the wall behind you. Pocket sand and run, thanks. Story 10, seen a guy on a full body waiver for exercises. The instructor gave him 1,000 smiley, frowny, smile then frown is one. The hardest, easiest exercise ever. Edit, for those who don't know, a full body waiver is something to the degree of cannot lift objects. No walking for more than 200 meters in one setting. No strenuous activities, etc. Basically making all normal physical activities out of the question. Story 11, in the Marine Corps. When we really up, we would go fishing. It is where you squat down like you're sitting in a chair and hold a shovel out in front of you in the air like a fishing pole. Then you just sit there for a long time, and if the shovel would start to droop down, my sergeant would grab the tip of the shovel and start to shake it and make me pretend I was reeling in the big one. One time me and a buddy got in trouble together. So they made him fish and me flop around on the deck like a fish he had already caught for almost an hour. Story 12, one of my friend from my first base and I were swapping basic stories, and I think he had the scariest. On the first day of third week, they hadn't performed up to standards, and the MTI told them Head be staying late that night to try to fix them. The MTI calls his wife to let her know Head missed dinner and would be home late, and she blew. She was screaming at the MTI about how he's just using his job as an excuse, how he doesn't even care about her. And while all this is going on, the MTI is just pleading with her. She hangs up on him, and the MTI looks at the flight with this expression of cold hate and says he was in his office for a minute to think of an appropriate way to punish the flight for their basic training is a lot of talk. The MTIs can PT you until your body gives out and scream at you, but they can't actually hurt you. In that moment, though, as the room waited for the MTI to come back, they weren't so sure that would be the case. He was going to make them pay, and my friend said that was the only time in basic he felt true fear. It turns out it was all an act. The MTI had that genuinely happen during a previous flight, and it had terrified them into compliance. So, well, he got his wife to pull it off every flight afterwards. When someone got caught going the wrong way or cutting in the chow line in OSIT Basic for infantry, the drill SGTS would make them wander about the FAC at random, repeating beep beep, wrong way. It was totally quiet otherwise, and they seemed like broken robots. Edit OSIT is not just for infantry, sorry. It's when you do basic in your AIT at same place. Stands for One Station Unit Training. Story 13, on the final FDX of a basic I was teaching a few years ago, one of less brilliant troops decided to take his laptop, which had smuggled into the field for this exact purpose with him, into a blue rocket porta-potty, so he could off to obnoxiously loud Asian. The idiot left his C9 on the wrong side of the door, though, and forgot it there when he came out. One of my Jack's junior NCOs found it and brought it back to the CP, and I naturally brought Buddy in to explain himself. The smart-ass troopalope decided to be clever to explain to us exactly what had been doing, not that there'd been any doubt, in the hopes that we'd be too embarrassed to do anything about it. I drew up an access list and made him stand watch on the blue rocket tactical shitter for the next 8 hours with explicit instructions not to let anyone in until they sign a visitor's log. We all had fun watching the brigade sergeant major tell him to get the out of my way before I in your hat. Story 14, USMC boot. One kid on Firewatch failed to notice the DI coming on deck, which means you immediately salute and report your post. So the DI ran up to the rifle rack, smacked it, and yelled, "BM, you're dead." He tried to respond, but was cut off by the DI. "You're a ghost now. You can't talk, go act like a ghost." Then the kid had to wander around the squad bay for the rest of his 2-hour Firewatch acting like a ghost. And he took that responsibility with a stride. Plenty of ridiculous and ghost noises, and with people's racks. We were all laughing our asses off for the next hour till our senior got pissed. Edit acting like a boot. Story 15, another from Basic, was a private was caught walking to the showers without wearing his clothes, just holding his towel and walking. The showers were in the same bay, and it was just males in the bay, but a female drill from another platoon came in and saw him, and made him drop and give 50 push-ups while... Story 16, we were deployed in Iraq, and a guy was in water bottles instead of walking to the bathroom at night. This is a common thing, but this guy wasn't getting rid of the bottles head, keep them underneath his cot for some reason. When the first sergeant found this out, he made the guy report to the commander while holding all of his bottles in a box in front of him. They tore into this guy while he was holding a box of his own urine. Story 17, a recruit in USMC boot camp thought he was special because he was an Eagle Scout. The drill instructor picked up on this and during point took him into the woods and made him build a nest. Then he had to squat over it in order to keep his eggs warm. Story 18, officers can't punish soldiers with any punishment that doesn't follow guidelines. That said, they can be ordered some stupid things. My friend got ordered to move a box weighing about 50 pounds from the barracks to the shower every 2 minutes for 2 hours. The officer's reason for it was because he didn't know where to put it and was trying to decide if it should be at the barracks or the shower. In the end, he ended up telling him to load it up in the truck. Story 19, a guy I worked with had a habit of falling asleep at his desk. He was a real, unfortunately, he was also a 1-star general's son. They made him sit at his desk with one of those exercise yoga ball things that still fell asleep, but he would hit his head on the desk or fall over. He also decided to tell his supervisor he had an appointment, but instead took a nap in his room. They called the cops on him and had him arrested for dereliction of duty. Fun stuff. Story 20, in Basic, we're going to throw out some trash. Left my rifle, which you're not supposed to do. Myself and 2 of my buddies had to hold on to our assault packs in one hand like a shield and long sticks in the other like a spear. Then we had to stack up in a line on a tree, and push with our shield for 5 minutes with our spears raised, yelling war cries. Apparently the Spartans did this for training, and apparently if I don't have my rifle in a combat situation, I will need to know how to do this. Story 21. I have an opposite story, where we punished our superior. When I was in South Korea in the mid-2000s, we had an absolutely evil lieutenant. He walked around like his didn't stink, thought he knew everything there was to know, pretty much like most LTs. One weekend, a bunch of us were walking back from the PX, loaded up with beer and snacks for the weekend. Like each of us had at least a case of beer and a few bags each. Hands were totally full. Our LT walks past us, and we nodded and said, "Sir, instead of saluting, most officers won't make you put down all you're just to salute, at least the good ones." This guy flips out about us not saluting and proceeds to PT the out of us for about 30 minutes. After that it was on. Anytime we saw this guy, we would grab everyone we could, form a line with about 20 feet distance between each person, and walk towards him. He would have to salute every single one of us. It didn't matter where he was when we saw him. We had about 20 soldiers be lining towards him just to salute. The best was when he was on his cell phone, cause he would have to put it down every 10 seconds just to salute all of us. This went on for about 3 weeks, him saluting everyone all the time, every single day. He finally got tired of it and asked us not to salute him anymore. Story 22. One of the first days in basic, a guy in my platoon was standing at attention while having his room inspected by the instructor. It didn't matter how nice his room was because there was a large piece of fuzz fluff on his shirt that immediately drew the sergeant's attention. Imagine a female, French-Canadian, sergeant with this accent, recruit Bloggins. "What is that on your shirt? Is that a fluffy?" "Yes, sergeant." "Why is there a fluffy on your shirt, Bloggins?" "I must have missed it, sergeant." "Missed it? It is so huge. How did you miss such a big fluffy?" She picks it off of him. "Hold out your hand." He holds out his hand, and she places it in his palm. "This is Mr. Fluffy. Find a home for him like a pill bottle or something from now on. Whenever I want to see Mr. Fluffy, you must bring him to me." And so, for the rest of basic, every time the sergeant found a piece of fuzz, she would yell out, "Amar Fluffy," and Bloggins would have to march over to her and present Mr. Fluffy, and she would formally hand him the new piece of fuzz to add to Mr. Fluffy. There's to pay if he didn't have Mr. Fluffy with him at all times. Story 23. My grandfather, Korea vet, had a story about a guy who kept getting things taken away from him as punishment. Apparently, before it was over, he had no socks or shoelaces, no underwear, and they took the inside part of his helmet. Story 24. Throwaway. To protect the innocent. I was once in the Navy, stationed at Kings Bay, a Navy submarine and training base in rural southern Georgia, USA, a stone's throw away from Florida. Due to this base may or may not contain nuclear weapons, there's a Marine Security Detachment Battalion something stationed there as well. The majority of these poor sods were just out of Marine kill camp, and were hot and heavy to go off to Midley-Ististon and shoot them some towel heads. Unfortunately, they'd landed themselves in a swamp in rural southern Georgia. Needless to say, they typically made very poor choices. Their superiors, however, normally disciplined them well. Amongst the punishments I witnessed were the following one. A group of Marines had decided to play soccer with an armadillo. Killing it, they were forced to perform a full military funeral for the poor creature, then stand honor guard at its grave for a week, 247, in full dress uniform, in the middle of the summer. Remember, this is in a swamp in southern GA, too. I happened to be out early one Sunday morning, chain smoking and drinking coffee outside of the Navy barracks, when an interesting sight came by. There were 13 Marines. 12 of them were running and carrying a telephone pole on their shoulders, 6 in front, 6 in back. The 13th man was in the middle of the pole, hanging from it, doing pull-ups as the telephone pole was being carried by the other 12 running Marines. After a certain number of pull-ups, he would swap with one of the carriers. 3. Speaking of this base, may or may not contain nuclear weapons. The Marines had to do regular patrols, driving slowly around in HMWVs or armored cars around the storage bunkers and the base at large. Apparently, there was a problem with the Marines in the vehicles falling asleep and running off the road. A brilliant NCO had the following great idea. Only one Marine would be in the vehicle, whilst the other Marine would be running behind it. If the vehicle were to start swaying off the road, the runner would awaken his driver comrade, and they'd swap. It didn't take long, however, for this plan to fail. Patrol vehicle went off the road, crashed, and the Marine running stayed the course, smacking into the back of the vehicle and rendering himself unconscious. Story 25, another oldie but goodie, is making a private hug a tree. It all depends on how you take it. Some privates thought it was funny to have to hug a tree, but for some reason some of them thought it was really embarrassing. Story 26, during my first deployment to Iraq as a 50 calories gunner, I had a salty sergeant for a team leader due to have been at the tip of the spear for the Iraq invasion. been to Baghdad in 2005, and now he was back for his third time in 2007. Not only was he intimidating, but he knew how to discipline you if you stepped out of line. I was a stupid, young private first class with about a year in the Army. I knew what was right and what was wrong, and thankfully was able to get on his good side. Our driver, though, he was a short, retarded specialist with a crust steak who recently did 4 years in Korea. This dude was so off. He even re-enlisted for it when his first stint was over. Dude was just weird and gross. Always had an excuse for everything. Nothing was ever his fault. He loved trying to pass the blame down my way, mostly because he outranked me. Our sergeant normally knew what was up and corrected him accordingly. While during a convoy security mission one day in southern Iraq, just outside of Diwania, he hit a pothole like a big one, probably 20LX20W. Our sergeant flips the out, asking what he was doing. The driver tries blaming it on me, saying I never let him know it was there. Since I was the gunner, I had to make everything aware to him because I was the eyes and ears. The sergeant chews me out, saying it was the driver's fault he didn't avoid the pothole. Since I was up top scanning for threats, we were the lead vehicle, so it's not like this pothole was obscured by anything, especially since it was in broad daylight. The driver then starts saying, I don't know, Sergeant, I couldn't see it because I'm short. He wasn't that short. I was maybe 57. Give or take an inch. He wasn't paying attention, and that's what the sergeant wanted to hear because it was the truth. Well, this irritates the out of our sergeant, and he called for the entire convoy, something like 20 semis, 6 HWMVs, and 2 M1117 ASVs to halt. He then tells me to pass down an empty 50 calories can. I do so with a quickness. The sergeant then passes the can to the driver and makes him use it as a booster seat. The driver protests. Then my sergeant gives him a direct order to do so. The driver backs down and does it. At every gate to every base we approached, my sergeant made the driver open the door and show every guard what he was sitting on. Then he was forced to sing him a little teapot. Me oh my, I sit on a high chair, so we don't blow up and die. Most of the guards just laugh their off. A few radioed for other guards to come see it. He was the laughingstock of our battalion for months. Story 27, I once spent 12 hours cleaning screens on Windows. That doesn't sound bad, does it? Try this. Find a small wire about the same gauge as the holes in your Windows screen. Gently push the wire through the hole in the screen to make sure that the hole is empty. Repeat for 3 minutes, then look away from the screen. Anything weird with your eyes? Try it for hours. Had a guy in a warehouse drop a pallet load of assorted nuts and bolts off a forklift. Boxes broke open. 100,000 little nuts and bolts everywhere of various sizes. He had to sweep them into a pile, repair the boxes, fit each nut to a screw to make sure of the size. The pile was then inspected. Then he had to remove each nut from the screw and place the screw in the proper box. Then place the nut in the proper box. Probably 25 or 50 per box, I don't remember. Doesn't sound too bad, right? Took 3 12-hour days. He wasn't allowed to sit down. He had to bend over at the waist, pick up a tiny nut and screw, straighten up, screw them together, then bend over for another, more than 100,000 times. Think about it. Story 28, probably the three-way. One guy on his back doing sit-ups, one guy with his butt of that guy's face doing monkey, the last guy's face between the sit-up guy's legs doing push-ups, funniest I ever saw. Story 29, a private put his camo on looking like Gene Simmons. He had it on for an hour before the drill sergeant put him upside down in a tree, shouting, I'm a chameleon, no one can see me. Story 30, military kid here. Watch my dad tell a Marine to paint rocks because the guy said that the motor pool looked like he spent 6 hours painting every rock white. It rained that night, and he had to start over the next day. Yeah, my dad is a cake. Story 31, former Marine here. So there's this calisthenic exercise, the actual term I'm not sure of, that called monkey. I cannot stress enough how monkey is merely a colloquialism. This will be important later. Anyway, this exercise looks really stupid. You grab your ankles and squat. So really, you do look like a copulating primate when you do it. During our squadron PT sessions, our CO liked to give our NCOs an opportunity to lead some exercises. One day, CPL Sharp was the chosen one. CPL Sharp was actually pretty dull, so he gets up in front of the entire unit and sounds off, your next exercise will be monkey ill count the cab. Before he can finish, our CO interrupts him. CPL Sharp, what will our next exercise be? For those of you keeping score, that was his opportunity to redeem himself. Monkey, SIR, swing and a miss, Sharp, swing and a miss. LT call bright call sign not so. Then shakes his head in disbelief and announces to the squadron that CPL Sharp has now inherited the not so call sign. Then the good CPL had to write a ridiculously long essay, something like 10,000 words on the mating habits of simian creatures. Edit guys, they're definitely not squat thrusts. I'm going to go with what Eudominus Temper has said and leave it at tactical twerking. Navy basic training, all of us are doing push-ups. When the instructor says down, everyone counts. When the instructor says up, One guy in particular, the screw-up, is told to shout, "Would you like fries with that?" The instructor told him to get used to it, because that's what he's going to be saying for the rest of his life. It's down, us one. Insta up, guy, would you like fries with that? It's down, us two. Insta up, guy, would you like fries with that? There was a pool of tears from laughter on the floor below me. Story 32. When I was a young private in the infantry, back in about 1993, I got in trouble for having a 6-inch knife on my field gear. Knives of that size had to be stored in the arms room. Go figure, I got a summarized Article 15, basically a slap on the wrist, which was 7 days extra duty, 7 days confined to barracks. The extra duty was cleaning up after the duty day, mopping and waxing the floors, taking out the trash from the admin offices, etc. Confinement to the barracks was meant to be the harsh part, but we live in a semi-remote area of post, so AFES opened a bar for the area in the basement of the barracks. Needless to say, I spent my 7 days confined to the barracks in the basement, enjoying some frosty beverages, darts, and bar food. To this day, I still don't know if my commander at the time was stupid enough to not know that there was a bar in our basement, or cool enough to not cars. Edit, I just found him on Facebook, and he did, in fact, cars a lot. Story 33, when we were heading to Iraq, we had to pass through Kuwait, Kuwait being the transient hub for soldiers heading to and leaving Iraq. It is very chaotic as a result of jet lag and the chaotic nature of Kuwait. My buddy had brought his weapon to the shower, but forgot to grab it on his way back to the tent. Shortly after he left, a sergeant came bursting through the door to see him sitting on his cot messing around with his new video camera he had just purchased to bring on the deployment. His punishment was to get up, take his weapon and camera, and go sit in the community shower area and make sure no one else leaves their weapon in the shower for the night. So what you would see when you want to take off your clothes to get in the shower was a fully dressed guy with a video camera just sitting there looking at you. Story 34. It didn't happen to me, but I had a friend that had a mouth on him, and the person in charge gave him the task of painting rocks because he felt gray, was boring. Story 35. Army here. Whilst an Iraq guy in unit got in trouble and had to clean every porta-john from the motor pool back to the tents. That was a lot of latrines, and you can't even imagine what an Iraqi porta-john looks and smells like. Either way, dude was puking, and it took him about 11 hours. Dude was not a shitbag after that. Story 36. I was a USAF firefighter. A F&G at station did not properly do checkouts on his vehicle and didn't make sure his water tank and Scion tires on apparatus were good. After downtime, my fire chief told him to don his gear on and grab a big trash bag. He made him stand on the flight line side of the fire station facing the tower and told him that the weather system was down and they needed him to stand there to get the directions of the wind. He was there for 2 hours. Every time he put his hands down, he would walk up to him and threaten to write him up and made up an AFI. Story 37. I always thought the basics were best, like the duffel bag drag. If you didn't lock your locker when you should have, you had to pack all your gear into 2 duffels and carry them around all day. Or if you got caught fighting, you had to hold hands with that person the rest of the day. I use that one on my kids now. Story 38. We had a waiver soldier that couldn't be smoked via PT and couldn't stand for extended periods during work. Dude was a huge stick, always mouthing off and being lazy. We had him sit in a camping chair and fill 10 sandbags with a tablespoon. Story 39. Not military personnel, but told to me by someone who was, guy had to dig a 6 feet deep hole and bury the newspaper that the CO had just finished reading. He digs the hole, buries the newspaper, and covers up the hole. It takes basically all day. He gets back to the CO and tells him he has buried the newspaper like he asked. The CO then asks him what was the date on that newspaper. He doesn't know, so he has to go get the newspaper he buried and see what date it is, rebury it, and tell his CO it was supposed to teach him the lesson of needing to pay attention to details. Story 40. I was at a Coast Guard base for NDROC Joint Service Leadership Training JSLT when some of us decided to ask a teacher about stories from his boot camp. This is my favorite in the mess hall. You aren't allowed to look out the windows, so one of the recruits looks out a window, and the CC sees him. To punish him, he had to stand at the window with his cups over his eyes like binoculars for the rest of chow, with the CC randomly yelling shipmate. What do you see? Edit, I see birds, sir. What kind? Seagulls, sir. Other edit, you can't look out the windows because they don't want you to. It's pretty hard when the main wall is all windows.